So this is a case that I've had my eyes on for quite some time, and the requests to review this case have far exceeded any other case out there at the moment. This is the Dan A4-SFX V3, and it's a 7.2 litre mini ITX enclosure that optimizes for hardware compatibility in a small footprint and volume. In fact, this is the smallest case that I've reviewed on the channel. It's 3 litres below the Fractal Design Node 202, 5 below the Encase M1, and 12 below the Cougar QBX. But despite being the smallest in the lineup, it is in fact the most expensive at $225 US, something that we'll talk about towards the end. Now, the structure and build quality of the A4-SFX truly is up there with the best, and that's largely due to using Lee & Lee as their manufacturer, who, as we know, make very premium enclosures. The design is a sandwich-based layout where we've got the motherboard and power supply on one side and the graphics card on the other. They're separated by a frame in the middle, which is also covered by an insulating sheet on the GPU side, so there's no shorts. Now, this compartmentalized design is made possible by a high-quality Lee & Lee riser cable that is now thankfully black with version 3 of the A4, and this thing feels super durable and like it will last decades to come. I've got the black model here, but you can also pick it up in silver, and the aluminium panels have a nice brushed finish. The entire case is breathable from the sides, top and bottom, so there's plenty of airflow for all components, and the general airflow design here is that each piece of hardware will be facing the outside of the case and will have access to fresh air through those ventilated panels. The panels themselves lock in with the same push-pin mechanism that we've seen with the Encase M1 and have further security with some small screws on the bottom and top, which are also countersunk and fit perfectly flush with the rest of the case. The front I/O is fairly minimal with just a single USB 3.0 port, and for someone who doesn't really use front I/O at all, I think this is sufficient for a small case, especially when you are restricted with space on the other side of the panel. The power button has also been improved for V3 and is now a bit more tactile to press, and the power plug is positioned thankfully towards the bottom of the case. The top and front panel are also a single sheet, which has been precisely cut and bent, again showing the attention to detail and build quality. Standing next to the M1, you can tell that they're both manufactured by the same company, and in terms of size, the Dan A4 is definitely smaller, but it's probably not a significant amount to a lot of people. For those that need their desktop system to be as portable as possible though, which is arguably a minority, the Dan A4 can comfortably fit in a backpack, which is pretty insane. Even for those who don't need a portable system at all though, and are fine with a laptop when it comes to portability, me including, I really do appreciate that the A4-SFX doesn't claim half of your desk space when it meets the rest of your setup like a typical mid-tower case. What truly makes this case unique and ahead of the pack though is compatibility, as you really can comfortably fit some powerful hardware in this enclosure. Graphics cards up to 295mm in length, 144mm in height, and 45mm in width are good to go, allowing for all Founders Editions and reference cards to fit with no issues, and larger cards like the 1080 Ti for the Win 3 from EVGA can be squeezed in there as well. You are limited to 2 slots though, so the larger 1080 Ti models won't fit, but 2 slot options from EVGA like my SC2 will have no issue. In terms of blower style cards versus open air cards, you're going to be fine with both here, since the fans will be drawing air in from a ventilated panel, and exhausting the air for the open air cards shouldn't be an issue either, with those top and bottom panels having that ventilation. There's no room for 3.5-inch drives here, but that's okay, seeing as 2.5-inch SSDs have become an increasingly more popular option due to falling prices over the years. So here we have support for up to 3 2.5-inch drives, one in the front, similar to what we've seen with the Encase M1, and 2 below the power supply, but you could also mount a 92mm fan here, or a 92mm liquid AIO, but more on that in just a second. For power supplies, we're limited to SFX here, as you could probably guess. There's no point trying to support anything larger given the constraints of the case, and also given that there are plenty of high-powered SFX options out there. Now, let's get to the most important part when it comes to hardware compatibility, and that's CPU cooling. So let's start off with air coolers, and here you're limited to just 48mm, which may be a bit of a concern for those running i7 8700Ks or Ryzen 7 processors. Or is it? In the community spreadsheet where users can log their thermal data, there does seem to be a few people running 8700Ks and Ryzen 7 CPUs on low profile coolers such as the Noctua L9i, and hitting some okay temps while stress testing in Prime 95. You've also got a couple of options when it comes to water cooling as well, and you can fit an Acertec 545LC, a 92mm liquid AIO, at the front of the case underneath the power supply, and this is what Linus did to cool an 18-core 7980XE. A 120mm AIO can also fit with the included side bracket with version 3, but here you'll need to drop your SFX power supply for the HD Plex 400. This is a 400 watt DC to DC power supply which can be mounted at the front of the case using the included standoffs, and using this instead of an SFX unit will allow for a 120mm AIO to be mounted on the side bracket. You will also need an AC external power brick if you are going to go down this route. This is a bit of a paradox though, because if you do need to go down the route of a 120mm AIO, you probably have a power hungry CPU, but at the same time, you probably won't be able to power it off a 400 watt power supply. Nevertheless, we will be looking at this in a follow-up video where we compare several CPU coolers that are compatible with the Dan A4-SFX and see how they run with something like an i7-8700K, and ideally we'll see if we can overclock it as well. Today though, we're just going to see how we can run an i5-8400 with something like a Noctua L9i and see what temperatures you can expect there. Now, speaking of building in the case, this thing was an absolute breeze. Since the case is so small and the mounting positions are so close to you, you feel like you're working with an open test bench, arguably easier than your typical mid-tower case. What I was most surprised with though after building was how much room was left inside the case. Even finding some spare room for the stock cables was quite easy. The Corsair Dominator Platinum memory modules that I initially installed were just a hair too tall though. The side panel still closed, but it certainly wasn't a clean fit. Another consideration is that, if possible, choose a mini ITX board with an M.2 slot not on the back of the motherboard. I found thermals here to be pretty unreasonable since the drive will be trapped between the board and the tray. My 960 EVO NVMe drive was idling at a toasty 72 degrees C and was throttling at 90 C during sequential writes. This isn't a fault of the case though, more so an inconsideration from motherboard manufacturers. Now, on the note of thermals, let's take a quick look at what you can expect. So I did some quick testing with the i5-8400 here with the Noctua L9i, and unfortunately my thermals weren't too impressive. My main discrepancy here against the other results that I saw in the community spreadsheet is that my V-core was running a bit higher than others, and if I had undervolted the CPU, things probably would have been fine below 80C. For the GPU, you can also run either blower or open air cards, as both have ample ventilation thanks to those side panels, so no issues there. Alright, so what about that price? $225 is insane. It's at that enthusiast level and seems unreasonable. But at the end of the day, this is an enthusiast case. I look at this case no different than I would look at the $200 plus mid-towers out there. Now, just because it's a small case doesn't mean that it should be cheaper compared to a bigger option or that you're getting less for your money. In fact, the aluminium side panels and the aluminium frame have been purpose made for this case, so they're not being recycled from other previous models because there aren't any. Now, having said that, I wouldn't say that I am happy with the price. I definitely like it to be driven down at least a little bit. After all, I did purchase this one myself. But having said that, I don't have even a little bit of buyer's remorse because I really do think you are getting your money's worth here. So overall, I am really impressed with the Dan A4-SFX. Even after researching the case for several months, I was still really impressed when I got it here on the review table and did a build inside it. So much so that, in fact, after I complete my NZXT H400i build, which I'm currently in the middle of, I am planning on transferring my current editing system inside this thing, or at least I'm going to try to. We'll have a look at CPU cooling in another episode and see if that's actually possible. I'll leave a link down in the description below for those of you who want to check out the A4-SFX over at sfflab.com. And as always guys, a huge thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one.